the appreciation.
Right.
But you own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, folks, if we can kind of gather together again. Perfect. We all ready, Nick? It's, yeah.
Very confidence inspiring.
Just let me know.
We're ready to go. Hey, Corey, can you hear us? That's okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
You just went on to mute instead of.
Corey looked muted.
Or you muted again?
There we go.
Try now.
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
I can hear Corey on my end, but I don't know if you can hear us.
I don't know. I see his noise.
I can hear you guys and I can hear Aaron. Can't hear me.
Looks like you can hear us, but we can't hear you.
It's kind of why I like it.
This is Mindy Gottsagen. I can hear both Corey and the board, if that's helpful.
Corey, can you try again?
Yep, I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Hey, way to go, Nick.
All right. With that, let's go ahead and call our meeting to order. This is the July 14th. Is that our day? Board of the Colorado State Board of Land Commissioners. We are here in beautiful Durango, Colorado. We had a day of visiting various properties that the land board owns or has connection to, including the old fort at Hesperus, which was the original site of Fort Lewis College. We went to Phil's World, which was an amazing mountain bike trail system. That was super cool to see. We also met with an archaeologist out there. We're going to be doing a cultural survey of our part of that property, just for our records and to be shared with the rest of the state. We then were able to tour kind of a before and after, as it were, of a best school, Animas Charter High School, which we went to their current facilities, which is basically 7 modulars tied together. And then we're able to see their new facility, which is being built and they hope to have open by this fall at the Fort Lewis College campus. So just an awesome day out in the community. And I want to recognize that we have Senator Cleve Simpson in the audience with us, who was also part of the tour that we had yesterday of the best schools, old school, new school. So terrific day to be spent, part of our day with the Capital Development Committee, who's also out here doing their work. So really, really an amazing experience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill for our roll call.
Commissioner Scanlon.
Here.
Commissioner Braden. Commissioner Chavez. Commissioner Heath. And Commissioner Clark.
Here.
So have the records show that all 5 commissioners are present in the room in Durango. Thank you.
And I want to also mention, we did have, prior to this, a breakfast meeting with county commissioners from La Plata and Archuleta County. So it's terrific to hear about their work, their concerns within their community, and how our work as a land board might be able to be of assistance and in collaborative partnerships. So always appreciate local elected officials joining us and learning more about state land boards work and our opportunities together. I don't believe we have any executive session. Is that correct?
No legal matters or property matter updates, so we don't need an executive session on our record today.
Okay, so we will just keep moving forward. I'd like to open the meeting up for public comment for any non-agenda item. If there's anyone, I don't think there's anyone in the room. And Nick, if there's anyone online.
Members of the public, if you'd like to address the board with matter that's not part of our agenda today, now's the time to do that. You can use the raise hand feature on your viewing screen, and we'll give you the opportunity to speak. Commissioner, I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, and I do want to call to your attention that we had a couple of comments submitted online from Chelsea Kelly, Jennifer Goddard, and Clyde Church. So if commissioners have a chance to read those comments, they will be entered into the record for this meeting as well. All right, with that, Director Ryan.
Announcements. Let me, commissioners, you know, we've been trying for a while to hire someone to run our water portfolio. And we finally got the funding for that in the last legislative session, the approval to do that. And we now have a position out in the market. Greg, you got 16 resumes, 12 resumes.
20.
Oh, sorry, 20. And we're going to start reviewing those and hope to have somebody on board to run our water line of business for us here in the next month or so. So exciting development for us. And then Ed, I think you had an announcement concerning your staffing as well.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to take a couple of moments. The land board has a great legal team to support the board and its mission. And you guys have had the opportunity to meet Aaron and Corey and Emma and see some of the work and presentations that they do. But we also have some great other team members in our office that provide support, including this summer. We have a summer intern, Lacey Lockard, who has joined us this summer and done some excellent work on the remarkable number of motions and briefings that we've had to do in connection with the Phillips case and the challenge to the board's decision not to grant a right-of-way for a driveway across open space property. Lacey's provided a lot of background research and drafting work. She's a Colorado native and a CU grad and is a rising third year law student at George Washington University. She's got a keen mind. She's been a great member of the team this summer. We look forward to taking advantage of her for another month or so before she returns back east. And unlike some, we work with interns routinely, but Lacey has a really sincere interest in the work that the land board has or does, and that has been a real benefit for us this summer. So just wanted to recognize her and her work this summer for us and give a shout out for that. So thank you.
Lacey, if you want to take a bow, you have your control.
Just the polite wave.
I would actually be interested in reading some
Of the
still in litigation that
yes, we'll make sure that you have, unfortunately, we'll put together a background packet for everybody. I think at various times you've seen most things. Currently, right now, so much of what is going on is procedural rather than substantive, that it's not the most fascinating reading, but we'll put together a background packet for you guys on the Phillips matter, so you have sort of the story at hand.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Lacey. We appreciate you supporting the work of the State Land Board and keep us posted on what happens next. Lacey's path forward. With that, I think we're now to the Department of Natural Resources report. Doug Vilsack, I believe, is online.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And
Great.
see you.
Great to see you all virtually. I wish I could have been down there. I always appreciate meeting with the commissioners, but my wife and I are headed out of town later today. I think I see Senator Simpson there as well. So hello, if that's actually Senator Simpson on the screen. Just to give a quick update, this is, I think as usual, when I say these DNR is very busy. This is our very start of our budget season, where we kind of cobbled together our budget requests to submit to the governor's office, as well as potential legislative proposals for next year. So no details on any of that yet, but July 15th is always a big date for us at DNR if you struggle to get a hold of us this time of year. So we're working on all of those, and also, of course, implementing a lot of the bills and budget requests for last year. As you all were mentioning, DNR and just all sorts of agencies are gearing up for some additional hiring related to last year. I think in particular, DNR, we have our AD for Energy Innovation, Assistant Director for Energy Innovation, and a tribal liaison position that shall be out soon, among a few others. And I know CPW has all sorts of kind of new staff for wildlife management and kind of shoring up our state park system that will be hiring soon. So if you know any good folks, have them get on the state jobs website, in addition to applying for the position you guys talked about for water. As Vanessa, I believe, talked about last month, we're also working on the America the Beautiful Challenge Grant process. I think Vanessa probably outlined some of the conversations we've had about that, but the grant application period closes next week. We hope to have some good proposals in there, really focusing on private land conservation, some of the Eastern Plains, kind of all over the state. So really looking forward to getting those in and kind of moving forward with that process. On the CPW front, as usual, a lot going on. One of the big things that's going on, and you may have seen it even in the news or on your Instagram feed, is that pursuant to Senate Bill 249 from 2021, which is the Keep Colorado Wild Pass bill, we were required to really start doing the marketing and outreach for the pass 6 months in advance of it being available. And so the pass will be available starting January 1st, 2023. And I think, as you all know, that will get you access to state parks and fund state parks operations, search and rescue, avalanche information, wildlife, all sorts of things, all sorts of needs for the agency. So we kicked off the outreach program for that. Send packets to all the county clerks in the state so folks can start getting an understanding of what that pass is. And also, very importantly, for the legislators that passed that bill, the ability to opt out should they so desire. So working on all the details of that. We also have an outreach campaign that we're working on to kind of round out the details of the pass, particularly kind of the low income pass or price point availability of the pass for folks that might not be able to afford the $29 pass that we've set up now. So we have a outreach program that I may try to post in the comments if that's at all possible, where we're having public meetings around the state. And for those of you in Southwest Colorado, I think tentatively those are scheduled for Montrose August 11th, and I believe Durango August 12th and 13th, that we're working with the Ute Mountain Ute and Southern Ute to determine what would work best for them for those. Other than that, at CPW, lots of announcements you'll hear about in the coming days about additional funding available for bears, outdoor equity, regional partnerships. I won't give those away, but we'll probably have a lot of press in the next few weeks about some great funding we're able to provide to folks. And the Parks and Wildlife Commission also has 2 new commissioners. Gabriel Otero, we've worked with Gabe for a while. He was very helpful on the Outdoor Equity Fund bill and some of our work in that space. He works for the Wilderness Society and has done some work for oil and gas in the past as well. So he'll be a great addition. And then Rich Redding, he is the Vice President of Science and Conservation at the Butterfly Pavilion. So some additional expertise around pollinators and science, I think, which will be helpful to the commission. And then lastly, for CPW, we are working, and I think as Vanessa discussed as well, really to vision out next steps for a statewide conservation, recreation, and climate resilience plan, and also to build our regional partnerships initiative. And so we just signed an agreement that will put $5 million more from GOCO and CPW into that effort. 3 million to fund regional partnerships, so really putting money on the ground all over the state. And then as well, some additional funding just for kind of that planning effort in general and capacity building at CPW and at the Colorado Outdoor Partnership to really get that process rolling forward. On the oil and gas front, I think the biggest news is that we are implementing the orphan well mitigation fee and enterprise that was passed in a bill last session. The fee is essentially expected to generate $10 million annually to address orphan wells in the state. This has been kind of a long time coming. I wrote the report back in 2019 that recommended some of this. So lots of hard work has gone into this over the years. And so that will pair up with a lot of the federal funding that I expect you all are aware of that will come in to address orphan well issues through the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And so in total, this should lead to 100 to 150 million over the next 5 years, solely from industry and from the federal government to address orphan wells in the state. So huge win there. For everybody, really. I think that bill was very broadly supported to move that effort forward. And then lastly, for oil and gas, we have 2 new oil and gas commissioners. One, Michael Cross, who has experience in oil and gas and has worked for legal counsel on oil and gas issues for many years. And then a loss to CPW and a great benefit to COGCC, Brett Ackerman, who many of you know, that's been CPW Southeast Region Manager, has now joined the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. So he's an oil and gas commissioner, and Brett has been tremendously helpful over the years, kind of working on wildlife issues. He's in the wildlife seat on the commission now. So I believe Brett worked quite a bit with the State Land Board on the PAP program. So
Yep.
He's a fantastic person. So we'll be working on filling his big shoes down in Southeast Colorado for CPW. On the water side, as Senator Simpson, I'm sure, is well aware, the water plan update is kind of the biggest news right now. CWCB has been working on this and conducting outreach all over the state for the past year. And right now, the plan, vision, and all the documents are out for public comment between June 30th and September 30th. So you can get on CWCB's website and comment on that plan. I won't get into too much detail, but there's a lot there. This is really the kind of big 5-year update that CWCB has been required to work on. So a tremendous amount of effort at CWCB going into that. And then a lot of touring. Again, as Senator Simpson knows, we had a great water tour in June, really led by Senator Simpson, I have heard, in many ways. A lot of great feedback from that. And I would say in some ways that's a celebration of the work that was done around Senate Bill 2228 to put $60 million into addressing compact issues in the Rio Grande and the Republican. So we will be working with the senator and stakeholders from the Valley to vision out how best to allocate those resources in the next couple of years. And similarly, the governor was out on the Eastern Plains touring the South Platte and the Republican on an ag and water tour out there. And of course, some of those funds will be used for Republican river compact compliance as well. So thanks again, Senator Simpson, for leading that effort. We don't usually get that type of influx of general fund to work on these issues. So I know that was a heavy lift. And then lastly, a lot of work going on in the forest climate space. We also had the governor up to Evergreen just earlier this week to talk about the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program, COSWAP program, which is designated over $7 million for landscape resilience in the coming months. Youth Corps will be visiting 32 projects in 18 counties to conduct mitigation work with that funding. And again, the result of some hard work with the legislature and funding allocated from the general fund to support those efforts. So thanks again to Senator Simpson, or if there's any of our other representatives in the room. That's all I have, and happy to answer any other questions. Plenty else going on as well.
Other questions for Doug?
Sounds like a busy summer.
Always.
Always, yeah. I don't see any questions, so thank you, Doug, and safe travels.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you again soon in person.
I hope so.
All right, let's move on to business before the board. Director Ryan, the staff report.
Commissioners, that's tab 2 on your agenda. The only thing I'd call attention to is that we've had 2 more of our field staff join and come on full-time. You may have heard the names of Cooper Carlson, who's going to be up supporting our north central and northeast regions. And then Eric Van Dyke is taking over the Lamar office. Commissioner Chavez, I think you know Eric, and he officially joined us July 1st. So our field team is fully staffed, yes. So,
And we're still trying to get authorization. We're missing one position.
we are getting authorization to hire a position that we haven't had someone in for a long time. But at any rate, that I wanted to just call your attention to them, and you'll be meeting them here over the next few months. We'll get them in front of the board. They're both great additions to our team. Other than that, you all have read the report. I'm happy to answer any questions. That may be the easiest thing to do.
This is Greg Okish, Assistant Director. There was a letter in your staff report that we wrote to El Paso County about the Section 16. I sat, while we were at the bike park yesterday, I was in the car, I was listening to a public meeting. And I thought their commission, it wasn't their commissioners, it was their Parks Advisory Board, held a listening session, listened to the citizens' concerns. I thought their board did a very nice job of sort of laying out their position, which is that the lease rate is reasonable. They want to sign the lease. They plan to sign it in September. And then there is a growing coalition of groups, the Open Space, El Paso County, the school district. They're trying to enroll some others who would probably over the next 10 years like to put together a plan to acquire that property and protect it permanently as community open space. And that's certainly will meet the concerned citizens' objectives. So I suspect you may hear something about that in the next few months. But at this point, the issue from my list, from what I heard on the call yesterday, I think the issue of the lease and lease rate has been satisfactorily addressed.
Appreciate that update.
Yeah.
And some of the public comments we received online were related to this as well. Okay, with that, anything else on the staff report? All right, let's move to, we do have a request for review. If you'll look in your packet, the Millwood parcel recreation lease, and Courtney Hurst, our Southwest District Manager, will be talking us through this agenda item.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Courtney Hurst, and I'm the Southwest District Manager for the Colorado State Land Board. Today, I'm before you with a request for review for the proposed recreation lease on our Millwood parcel. So before I begin, I'd like to introduce Mr. Josh Boren. He will be joining us, I believe, over Zoom to provide comment to the board after my presentation. So I will go through a bit of a summary and then we will hear from him before the board.
Truly, don't we have other guests here in person?
Okay, yes, we do. Here in the room, we've got Lori, Shane Trudy, and Naomi Reese, who may also provide comment after my presentation. So the Millwood parcel is located here in Southwest Colorado. It's in Montezuma County, and it's just north of the town of Mancos. It's a fairly typical 640-acre parcel. Here's a zoomed in map of the parcel, and as you can see on 3 sides, it's surrounded by private land ownership, and then on the west, or excuse me, on the east, it's bounded by the State Forest Service. The U.S. Forest Service,
Yep.
rather. Here's just a kind of a typical snapshot of the parcel. And I did want to mention it is managed by the Colorado State Forest Service, and Mark Level, who we met yesterday, is the forester out of Durango that manages this parcel. And they do a lot of different activities here, including some tree health, forest health activity, as well as having chainsaw classes for different agencies. So it's a well-used parcel in that regard. So before I begin, I guess I'll give a little bit of background as to how this arrived before the board. And I'll start with the fact that over the last 2 years, both the recreation and the agriculture leases on this parcel were exposed for competitive bid. With regard to the agriculture lease process, that was a more lengthy process, which at one point included a competitive bid for the vacant parcel and resulted in the lease finally being awarded to Mr. Shane Truby, who was a successful bidder, and the board awarded him that lease in November of 2021. With regard to that, the lease was not going to be fully active until the improvements transferred from the previous lessee to Mr. Truby. And so that process was initiated in November of 21. At the same time that Mr. Truby was awarded the agriculture lease, he did reach out to me and express his interest in the recreation lease. We spoke both over email and on the phone, and I did ask Mr. Truby to hold off on supplying us with an application, given the other moving pieces surrounding the agriculture lease situation at that time. And I did also say to them that if a competing bid did come in, that I would let him know. Let's move forward a few months to February of 2022, when we did receive a competing application for the recreation lease in the Southwest District Office. That application was reviewed by staff and processed and approved by staff for a recreation lease that was placed on the May 2022 board leasing agenda for your approval. In April, Mr. Truby became aware of the fact that a competing bid had come in, processed, and he had not been given the opportunity to put in his own. Well, let me back up. I hadn't contacted him to let him know to put in a bid for that. So Mr. Truby was upset about that, and rightfully so, felt like he had been told that there would be some contact from the state land board about this, and there was a bid. So with that said, I spoke with Director Greg Okish, or Assistant Director Greg Okish, and we discussed our different options and felt like the best thing to do was to remove the lease from the board leasing agenda, which was awarding the lease to Mr. Josh Bourne, Southwest Colorado Hunting Services, and then expose the lease again for competitive bid. So since it had not gone before the board yet, no lease action is final until you approve it. So essentially no lease had been granted to Mr. Bourne at that point. So, I'd like to acknowledge that my saying to Mr. Truby that I would be back in touch with him is not standard procedure. It's very hard for us as district managers or staff in general to remember months down the road about something, and it is not something that is generally practiced. So that kind of started the ball rolling, and then in the intervening time, just compounding factors. We had a lot of staff turnover at the Southwest District Office. I was doing 3 jobs for a number of months there, and just kind of juggling different things. And in addition to that, the kind of the lengthy process with the agricultural leasing and just the time frame between talking with Mr. Truby and when we actually received an application. So I simply forgot is the end of the story there. And I'd like to acknowledge that we recognize that there's really no perfect solution here. It, one way or the other way does impact both parties, either Mr. Warren or Mr. Truby. So the thought or the thinking behind staff's decision was simply, let's just make it fair as best we can and just put it back out and give both parties the chance to bid again on the recreation lease and start over, essentially. So with that, based on the information provided to the board at the July 14th, 2022 board meeting, staff recommends that the board uphold the staff decision to remove Southwest Colorado Hunting Services LLC recreation lease on the Millwood parcel from the May 2022 board leasing agenda and to advertise the recreation rights on the property for competitive bid. And so, go ahead.
Sorry. This is Greg Okish, Assistant Director. I would just add one more point before, and maybe we can go back one slide. As Courtney said, it's not ideal. The basis for the request for your review, which I think was clear in the memo, is that Mr. Bourne is objecting to
Yes.
our decision to put this back out to competitive bid. And I'm sure you'll hear from him on that, but that's the issue. And I think the question in front of you is whether or not we acted reasonably in taking this proposed course of action. And you'll have some time to hear from the others and decide what you think before we ask you to make a decision.
Any questions for Courtney?
So the lease application was received from Mr. Warren. At some level, approved at staff level to be added to the work agenda.
Correct.
And then removed, I just want to make sure I understand that. Sure. Removed from the leasing agenda for approved the leasing agenda in May.
Correct.
So no lease was ever issued.
Correct.
Thank you. For on the timing. So was there any other notice of the foreign lease going on that lease agenda apart from like when the board packet goes out?
I suspect not. I can't think of a reason there would be.
Yeah, there wouldn't be anything else in the process that would have notified Trudy or.
No, I don't believe so. And at the time that I was contacted by Mr. Truby's agent in April, Mr. Truby had not put in a recreation lease at that point. And that was the first point of contact about the recreation lease.
I think but I'm not sure what information you're trying to glean, but it might be helpful to ask Mr. Truby when, how he became aware of the Bourne application things, but no, there was no public, no notice that we sent out.
That's, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I understand that you guys should also have a chance to had it listed anywhere else.
Just take a look at the letter that we sent out dated March 18th, 2022. It does not state that we would be to control legal stuff. Correct? So I was just curious why this was.
It is not. No, so staff, and Abe, I might ask you to speak to it directly on recreation leases, but in general, this is the kind of lease that goes on your leasing agenda on a monthly basis that you see, and when you approve that leasing agenda, it's finally approved. It requires board approval.
But these letters that we send to people don't necessarily state that the process is it's March 18th letter.
I think that's a fair point. I think we've been working on our letter templates. I believe some of them clearly state that the ag lease, the ag letters, I believe are very clear. We're working on getting all our letters clear in that regard. And if it wasn't, it will be.
You mentioned that there was uncertainty regarding whether Mr. Truby would pay the previous list. So
It was at the end of April that transfer finally occurred, and Mr. Truby's lease was updated to have an effective date of March, or excuse me, May 1st. So his lease was not effective.
Any other questions from commissioners? Courtney, do you want to see if any of the folks involved in this? You're all welcome to come up and talk with us if you'd like to.
I think, actually, I think Mr. Bourne would be first, yeah.
Great, thank you.
We have I don't actually have Josh Bourne listed on the named participants, but we have a caller calling in on a 970 number, ends in 153. And
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Bourne?
This is Josh Bourne. Yeah, I wanted to bring this to the board because I thought that I'm not sure whether it was publicly posted, and I was awarded the lease, or I wasn't completely awarded it, but I was told I was accepted. And then just because I don't know if there's some favoritism or if there's a reason, because Mr. Truby didn't see the post, we get to go back in time and have me rebid when I've already been accepted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
No. Yeah, no, we understand that perspective. Any other comments, Mr. Bourne, that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I mean, Courtney explained it very well. It seems like a mistake was made. I believe that just because Courtney had told somebody that she would remind them doesn't change the fact that I followed the procedure and move forward. And Mr. Truby, who I don't know, hasn't done anything. But I'm forced to rebid against him.
This is Assistant Director Okish. I might clarify, and Courtney, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think I've got this right. It wasn't only that we asked Mr. Truby asked if he could submit a proposal for the rec lease at that time, and we asked him not to because there were so many moving parts going on with the ag lease. We wanted to wait and see how that settled out. So I think it was more than just to clarify, I think it was more than we just said, we'll remind you. It was, we said, please don't submit now. We will tell you if we get a competing application so you have an opportunity. So I think our statement to Mr. Truby was more affirmative about the action we would take than simply a request that we remind him that this opportunity existed, if that makes sense.
But it was posted publicly.
It was, and I believe, we can ask him, I believe that's why he was aware of it in the first place.
Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. Specific to that, if Mr. Truby had submitted at that time, is that would have been had to go through that process? I'm just curious if it was separately an opportunity to take an application, but you're not processing it yet because of that same reason.
So I'm going to do a brief intro and then you take the details.
Okay.
Just to be, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. This was published a year, once the existing rec lease expired, this was published as we do with all of them. So this was published like don't know how either party became aware of it, but we published it. So take it from there. What happens if we publish it, we get multiple applications?
Yes, we would hold the applications until 180 days before the lease expires, and then there would have been a competitive bid option for the recreation lease. Under a scenario in which Mr. Truby was notified in a timely manner, we would have had Mr. Bourne's application and Mr. Truby's application, and anybody else that came in, and that would have resulted in a competitive bid auction process. Does that answer?
Well, so are we saying that what ideally what would have happened is just that we're not making any separate statements, it's that it gets published at the time it is published. And we see that at that time, the bids at that time.
So I have kind of a follow-up to Commissioner Clark's question. This is Commissioner Scanlon. So, but for the fact that you told Mr. Truby not to submit an application, his would have been submitted.
Mhm.
And then we still would have, the period would have still been open for subsequent or other applications to also be submitted, but his would have been in the mix. But because that didn't happen, then you had forgotten that possibility of him doing this was out there. So when you got the other submission, you thought you had a sole person. Is that accurate? Okay. Okay.
Courtney is the one that walked me through the process of applying. So, and she knew which parcel it was.
Yes. Commissioner Clark.
Sorry. And I apologize, but I should have it would help me to see all the dates that staff did not then affirmatively let Mr. Truby know of this other piece, but was it not then publicly accessible information in between technically to him as well?
I'm sorry, what do you mean was publicly
Was
accessible?
he still waiting to delay because he was just waiting for us to tell him?
Yes.
But did he technically also have the opportunity to see?
We asked him not to submit an application. We said, look, there's just a lot going on in this parcel right now. We haven't resolved how the ag lease is going to play out. I'm speaking on Courtney's behalf, and I believe the conversation was, look, let's not deal with the rec application right now. If we get a competitive application, we'll tell you. But in the meantime, let's get the ag lease sorted out, and then we'll figure out what to do.
So it was published, then this conversation happens.
Yes,
And separate.
yes.
Commissioner Trust, we hear from.
Yeah, I think we should. Mr. Bourne, any follow-up comments or questions before we have Mr. Truby come up and talk with us?
My only other comments would be that, at the time that she said it was accepted, I also took on clients that, planning that this was going to move forward, and I see that I'm going to have, either way, I'll have to bid again, and the price will go up for me, or I don't get the bid, and then I have income loss from that.
Thank you for those follow-up points.
I guess I'd like to mention that in April, I did reach out to Mr. Bourne over email after receiving some concerns from Mr. Truby's agent that there was trespass on the Millwood parcel by outfitters. I did reach out to Mr. Bourne, and I want to say right up front, it wasn't Mr. Bourne. But during that email exchange, I did remind him that until the lease is approved by the board, he had no access, and that it would have been trespass had it been him. So it was made clear, and he acknowledged, yes, that he understood that. So.
All right, thank you. Mr. Truby? Or is it Naomi? Yes, as well. Welcome. If you could introduce yourself for the record.
I'm Naomi Reese, agent, land use agent for Mr. Truby.
I'm Shane Truby.
And I'm sorry, I've been like scribbling little things that I think we should mention. But just to back up a little bit, we like 99% concur with the way that this issue has been presented here in the staff packet. There's just a couple of little minor things that aren't probably worth talking about. But Mr. Truby has been working on this piece of property, working towards an ag lease for probably going on a year now, almost, maybe more. And he has consistently expressed his very serious desire to have the ag lease on the property. As part of that, he did end up back in November having a conversation with Courtney about the rec lease too. There's multiple reasons for that, but really his primary reason for that is that there's one watering hole on the entire parcel, and he's going to have his cattle in there. And he is concerned about having a hunting lease in there, or particularly if it's an outfitter. Obviously, they're going to be around that one watering hole where Mr. Truby's cattle are also going to be. That was his primary reason for asking about the rec lease, so that he could maybe benefit from that as well, and he'd be in a better position to make sure that his cattle were being protected. So that's how the whole conversation started last fall. About the same time, the ag lease side of it became complicated enough that he brought me in. I work for him in another capacity as a land use agent, and it became just complicated enough that it was clear that we should maybe take it to the next level in terms of detail and paperwork. And that's when I got involved. And his understanding was that that he was waiting until spring, per Courtney's direction, to apply for the rec lease. He was aware that it was open. So over the winter, we were in very regular contact with the state land board. I myself had multiple conversations with William Wilson. I had a teleconference with Greg Ochis, and multiple emails and conversations with Courtney. And so there was never any opportunity for anyone at the state land board to think that Mr. Truby wasn't very seriously interested in this parcel, even if the ag lease hadn't been consummated yet. And also, I made a point in multiple letters to the state land board to say that Mr. Truby was very much looking forward to being a good steward of this land. And that he was very serious about this, even if we had some concerns about the process. There was never any question that ag lease was going to be consummated by Mr. Truby, at least not from our side. So in March, when I contacted Courtney and to ask about that rec lease, because we were coming up on spring, and I wanted to go ahead and submit a rec lease application for Mr. Truby. And then she responded that it had already been awarded to Josh Boren. And then in a teleconference soon afterwards with the assistant director, I was told that that was the way it was going to be, and that was that. And then Courtney let us know that they were going to put it back out for competitive bid. So we immediately submitted another rec lease, and that's sitting somewhere in some office. And we're more than willing to do whatever we need to do to renew it if that's necessary in order to enter into the process. I do want to just reiterate a couple of things. As Courtney has pointed out, there were some compounding factors. And so that late summer, fall period of time, there was staff turnover. It was never even clear to Mr. Truby who he was supposed to be working with. And when I first came on, there was definitely some of that confusion still. It took a while, it took a few months to really pin down, who the point of contact with the state land board is, what is the exact process here. So that I agree was definitely a compounding factor that Mr. Truby should not be penalized for.
Furthermore, as the assistant director has pointed out, it wasn't just a matter of reminding. It was a matter of being directly told to not submit a lease correctly set. And we followed through when it was coming up on spring, we followed through to say, okay, it's time for us to submit this. And we're surprised that it had already been awarded. So those are kind of the things in not even a nutshell. I would like Mr. Boren to know that, and the state land board to know if there's even the slightest hint that the word favoritism has anything to do with this. I can promise you that after what we've gone through with the state land board over the ag lease, that there's no favoritism offered here, not at all. Oh, and the last thing in terms of public notice, and I haven't checked for a few weeks now, but I was checking regularly. It's actually, I have an assistant and he's got a checklist of things that he checks regularly. So checking this particular piece of property to see what leases were on the property was something that he was doing. And that rec lease never made it onto that public list of leases. And in fact, these ag lease, although the lease number is appropriate, it has somebody else's name on it. As of at least a few weeks ago, it still had that person's name on it, even though the ag lease was awarded in May. It's a person who I can only hope maybe is extended family or something. I don't know. It's a dentist who lives in Missouri, has been awarded that ag lease by name. The number is Mr. Truby's lease, however, so I haven't been too worried about it because I know it is his lease. And that's all I have. We're happy to answer any questions. And do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd like to say that from the very beginning, the first time that I ever had direct contact with the state land board was Ron Rivali and Courtney. And at the end of the ag conversation about the ag lease, I expressed interest in the rec lease because they directly are tied together. I don't want to muddy any waters here or confuse anybody. The ag lease is completely separate from the rec lease. However, because I leased the piece of property to the south and I've had for 12 years that joins the state school section lease, the water that is on the only source of water on that state school section belongs to this private land that I lease. And so I'm tied to it directly. And so in that very first conversation with Ron Rivali and Courtney, towards the end of it, I made comment that I wanted to visit with somebody. Even going so far that I asked them for the name and contact information for the current rec holder, because if I was going to be interested in the rec lease, I wanted to try to find out some particulars. And that gentleman's name to this day has never been released to me. I had asked for it on multiple occasions before I even applied for it, because that's how much interest I had in it. And knowing that there was a potential that this very same thing could happen today, I even jumped far enough ahead to even ask if I could submit an application in either October or November about this. I'm not quite sure why I was put off, and I don't know why that ag lease had anything to do with the rec. They're two totally separate things, but I had interest, and I was specifically told that I had to wait till spring. And my exact words were, I don't want to find out that I'm in second position. I want to know going forward that there's no way anybody can get in front of me. So can I go ahead and do that? And then you have it on file. And I was specifically told, no, please don't submit one. Wait till spring. So I was told to contact him in April, which I did, only to find out that it was awarded to someone else. And so that's why we are where we are today. So I was extremely proactive in trying to get the ball rolling, and try to get on.
Yes, the word awarded keeps getting, the
Yeah.
lease has never been awarded to anybody.
Right.
There's been a staff there was a staff review of an application, because I think everybody's purposes, we don't want to use the word awarded.
Sorry.
I think it's just
Right,
Mr. Bourne is
that was
concerned.
correspondence. This is Commissioner Lee. In the letter of March 18th, I want to acknowledge that I think had I received this letter where it says that you have been approved, the application has been approved, the rest of the state agencies, that we need to acknowledge that's the error.
I will, and I will also point you to the follow-up correspondence that clearly said the lease was not awarded to Mr. Bourne until the
I acknowledge,
commissioner.
I just want to say I believe that.
Yeah.
we are in error.
And I was also told in an email that I mean, I don't have the email in front of me to know if the word awarded was used as or given, but I was directly told by Courtney in the email that it had been given.
So we can,
Had been approved by staff.
Approved by staff.
And that's,
I mean, I have no idea what the substitutes of that are.
well, and in addition, I'd like to respond to Mr. Truby saying that I gave a specific date by which I wanted the application. I never said contact by April. I simply said contact us in the spring.
That's what we said on.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he just simply said I asked
it's-
him to contact.
You did say April, and it would be on the May document. That's exactly what I was told.
I would respectfully disagree.
I'm not sure it totally matters. We get the intent. You thought you were going to be notified that you were trying to follow up at some point.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
regardless, it was too late. Commissioner Clark?
Thank you for that. But here as well as a lot of, just know I'm very focused on what's the official record. And then understand that there are emails and other conversations and other things. Which in my mind, I keep separate, and so I want to understand some of that. Can you speak to Director Okish? I understand that there was an affirmative statement for Mr. Truby to submit his application. Was there a particular reason why it would not be appropriate to submit an application at that time that is held so that it is
yeah, I
from the
think, yeah,
staff side, you know?
I think there were several. First, I'm not trying to make excuses. We were down at one point 2 staff people. It was the middle of COVID. The office wasn't staffed. Our offices were not being staffed full time. It was just, we were trying to manage a lot of moving parts with very few people and in a very unique situation. So I think there's a context piece that's important. So that was part of it. Secondly, it's great. I mean, I appreciate the fact that Mr. Bourne and his representative are saying there was no question they were going to take the lease. There was clearly a question. There was a 6-month disagreement about whether or not Mr. Bourne was willing to.
Sorry, Truby.
Mr. Truby, I'm sorry, was willing to compensate the previous lessee for the value of the improvements. And we believe there was a very real chance that he may choose not to take the lease. If that happened, we did not want to be halfway through the process of awarding it. As he said, his interest in the leases was to have both of them. So we were interested in seeing first how the agriculture lease played out to ensure that at the end of the day, we in fact wanted the recreation lease. So we were trying to sort of simplify the amount of work we try to do with limited staff in a period of time when there are a lot of moving parts.
And would you have had to act on an application that was already in? If you're asking for the whole thing,
No, but it was, hang on. No, but it was staff's judgment at the time. I mean, I can't put you in staff's shoes at that point in time. It was simply the way we chose to deal.
And hindsight being what it is, that would have been the appropriate action, because you're entirely correct. With all the moving pieces and a lot to juggle, I just thought, let's wait. But yes, I could have very easily taken the application and it could have sat in a drawer until such time as the process goes.
Well, she's right.
Yeah.
I've had 2 additional office managers working with the person we hired in that office to clean up the stacks of files that were sitting on the desk that had gone unattended during COVID. So while I'm appreciative of COVID, of Courtney taking responsibility and saying, sure, we could have put another file in that file. At the time, I was trying to minimize the amount of paperwork that was simply piling up on top of desks in that office, and we're still trying to dig out.
And if I may, I understand that perception versus something in writing is very, is a factor. It's always going to be a factor in any of these things. But I can, speaking for myself, I can't speak for conversations that Mr. Cooney might have had before I came on in November, but speaking for myself, I have a letter here dated December 17th, in which I end by saying this letter is provided to the State Land Board to demonstrate Mr. Truby's persistence and desire to reconcile the issue at hand and move forward with the lease. Mr. Truby remains exceptionally interested in leasing this land and being a good steward of the state's resources. And that is not the only time I said that. I said it verbally to multiple people. I said it in writing at least this time, and I'm certain it was more often than this. There should not have ever been any question that he was going to move forward with the ag lease regardless of how it turned out at the end. And I said that directly.
March 18th letter.
This is Commissioner Heath.
Excuse me. To Mr. Warren, it talks about a $100 fee for a review of this matter. And I guess I'm back again to the notification, which in no way suggests that there needs more approval, which is a serious omission. But was there a $100 fee required here?
Yes.
So-
He submitted.
There's always a $100 application fee required.
Remove that because it feels like it's landlord's issue and not whoever was subjected to a $100 fee. Bring this to our attention.
No, I'm sorry, there's a published set of fees that we charge consistently for applications.
So this says that if you request a review of the
Yes.
decision.
Yes.
Regardless of which decision you make, we always, it's up to you what you'd like to do, but we consistently charge $100 for somebody to submit a request for review, which covers some of the process of, some of the steps of processing it, but that's consistent across the board. I will just say, if you choose to remove it in this case, I don't know what you will choose to do in future cases. I've never seen it
It's a
removed before.
secondary issue to our most important decision here. I think we believe that no one should be charged a fee when in fact the issue is whether or not we're at fault.
I don't think, respectfully, I don't think the issue is whether or not we were at fault. I think the question is whether or not you concur or disagree with the staff decision, which was to propose that we remove Mr. Boren's lease from your leasing list and put the lease back out for competitive bid as it would have been done, or I'm sorry, accept Mr. Truby's application, which will then trigger, if Mr. Boren determines he still wants to apply, which will trigger a competitive auction, which is what would have happened had we had Mr. Truby's application in hand and then received one from Mr. Boren. There would have been an auction scheduled and the high bidder will get the reparations. That is the,
I think the fee is a separate issue. Anyone can ask for a review of any decision we make, correct?
Yes.
And we can certainly revisit that as to what our findings are once we do that review, if that fee's still applicable or not. So I think you raised an important point, Commissioner Heath. I want to continue a dialogue with commissioners. From my perspective, both Mr. Truby and Mr. Boren followed staff direction and advice and counsel. And the issue is that our Southwest District office was in total disarray and Courtney was juggling best she could. And so, there was a perfect storm in the office that I think directly impacted both of these applicants. And how do we resolve this in a fair way going forward? There certainly wasn't any intent, I'm sure. Courtney, if you could go back in time, you would do things very differently. And I recognize that as well. sort of a unique combination of events. But for our commission, do we want to proceed forward with a competitive bid process and uphold the staff's decision related to so or not? And that's the review that we're conducting today. So with that, as kind of, and then you're free to disagree with my perspective on this, but I think that's where we're at in this conversation. And we will have to make a decision. Commissioner Clark.
So yeah, I mean, I view this as, this is a due process for both parties. And completely agree with what Mr. Scanlon has shared in terms of, you know, we recognize the context, or I recognize the context of what was happening at the time, but we acknowledge that like it's not ideal. With that being said, I keep seeing this kind of a public process happening, kind of a private process happening in terms of communication, and I'm also looking from Mr. Warren's perspective that he didn't know that this other side of things were happening either, following a process that is out there in the public. It's not clear from that, I mean, it seems that this has been approved, I can move forward in this way. And so I'm struggling with not doing this as two wrongs don't make a right, and trying to look at it it's not great. We do layered leasing and other things on a regular basis. We do know how and work with folks. I know the staff put to accommodate and hearing the issue about the watering hole and different things. We have multiple legacies in the state, and so that is really doesn't require things in the same hands to be able to make that work. With your underlying ag lease, and so I'm kind of in a King Solomon mode of like, in this case, we don't have to split the baby in it. So I'm leaning towards thinking that, you know, finally this ag lease is worked out. And I'm leaning towards not reopening the process, just in that we acknowledge there was a mistake there, but that was also kind of these other conversations that were extra or ancillary to some of the public process that this other person went through, and you didn't know about exactly what he was doing, and he didn't know what was happening, these conversations either. So that's where I am now.
Commissioner Clark, and I don't mean to be argumentative, but if Mr. Truby had been able to submit a bid in November as he was requesting to do, then that bid would have been put up against Mr. Warren's lease competitively. And I think that we're hoping that you choose to just go ahead and enter into that competitive process that would have occurred had he not been told to not do the lease. I understand that. And yeah, I'm not, we'll go in a back and forth of that, but it's just, but ultimately we did have this other process, and someone else did bid who didn't expect to be going against someone else either. So,
Thank you. Other comments or questions from commissioners? I will share that I think us not allowing you to put in an application was a fatal mistake. If you had done that and it was sitting in a drawer, but for us telling you not to because we were trying to save paperwork and factors that were beyond your control, this would have been just a normal competitive bid process. And that's where I think we really erred, was not, and I agree with you, the ag lease and the rec lease are very separate issues. I respect that there was a question about whether you'd still want to pursue a rec lease should the ag lease kind of issues not be resolved. But honestly, that's not our decision to make. That would be your decision to make. So I think that's where we made candidly a serious mistake. So I am leaning the opposite direction. I totally respect Commissioner Clark's perspective, and normally I'd be going down that path. if there was any ambiguity to this, like if it was just, oh, we said we remind you, but we didn't, people do have an obligation to track, the timing and process of our bid processes. But the fact that we wouldn't accept an application from you is, for me, a really a deciding factor. Commissioner Braden.
So I think I would align my point of view with your comments just now, because I do think that you had mentioned, Commissioner Clark, a public process, a private process, or an informal process. And while it is tempting to just say, oh, we should just follow the public process or paper trail, ultimately, I'm sort of persuaded by this notion that this private process, this informal process, put a finger on the scale and changed behavior in a way that would not have happened otherwise. And that's compelling, or I should say fatal. I also think that this is one where our written formal process documentation, the letters that we send out, need to be better, need to be more clear. The letter that Mr. Boren received, I would almost go so far as to say it's inaccurate. And it seems to confuse, we seem to use very similar words in our, both written, the way we talk about this, written correspondence, approved, awarded, issued, releases that are frankly confusing to me. And we need to do better on the public process side as well. So while I agree, there is no way out of this that's fair to both parties. This is not good. So I found myself reluctantly persuaded that to support the staff decision there. It's the most fair, not good options.
I echo those comments, and I neglected to say, I really feel for Mr. Boren. He didn't do anything wrong. He proceeded forward. He worked at the advice and counsel of our staff. He thought everything was fine. And now we are indeed turning the tables on him. So I want to recognize that as well. Commissioner Heath.
Yes, I too recognize that this is not an easy way to resolve something that seems completely unfair to both parties. Is it appropriate to ask if there were some solution? Are you interested in the recreational rights just to protect your water source, or are you also interested in the property recreational money and other activities? Because I don't know if there's a way to find some solution.
Yes, I'm very much interested, and I don't know if it's in the paperwork that I filled out, submitted also the, the paperwork to get this. So I very much would like to have an opportunity for the recreational lease as well as the water situation as well. So yes.
But it's a private use, it's not an outfit.
Yeah, not enough.
Any further comments from commissioners? Any other public comment related to this agenda item? Please come forward, and if you would state your name for the record.
Steve Winfield YD.
Steve Boyd, thank you.
And I'm just a landowner, kind of. I'm not adjacent to the school section, but I am just one property over. I border the tribe on the west, and the tribe, Yukon tribe borders the school section there. That being said, I've been affiliated with this school section for almost 40 years. I ran the Yukon tribe branch for 6 years. So I was on the school section at that time, and then I had quit that job, and I am now the ditch rider. So there's a ditch that runs right through this school section, Cricket Creek Ditch. So I'm probably as good as a representative as you're ever going to find of being on this piece of property, this parcel, the Ute Tribe Ranch and the school section as you'll ever find. There's no dividing fence. There's no fence line, there's no markers. My concern is, and I'm pro hunting, I'm not against hunting. I want to put that up front. But I am kind of representing Harold Diggs also, who borders the ranch to the south that Mr. Truby leases there. I've talked to him about it, and our concern is an outfitter in there with multiple hunters. He is not pro hunting. Him and his wife are very against any hunting at all. They're from Texas. People have tried to hunt their property, and she just will absolutely not give an inch on anybody hunting any of that. So I have some concerns about and he has to, outfitters being right up against his fence line. Since there is no boundaries on this school section and it's not flagged or marked, there's no fence saying, don't climb over this fence because you're going off the school section. How will an outfitter's hunters, they'll be all over that driveway property, and then they will be on ours. We're just on the other side. So my concern is that these hunters, not knowing where any boundaries are, could possibly be scattered all over that place. And I don't think that's something that my family wants, and I know the Yukon tribe does not want any out-of-state hunters on their property. So I just wanted to express that concern just as a once again, I'm pro hunting, so I don't have anything against. I've been a guy in a hunting camp and had horses, so I know how the outfitting procedure works, and I know how to state hunters very well. And they tend to drift off boundaries.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Appreciate your comments. And Abe, this is Abe Medina. This is your job.
Abe Medina, Recreation Program Manager, and I appreciate those comments. That's something that I hear very often. However, I mean, it is state law that hunting, you have to, as an outfitter and as a private hunter, it's your responsibility to know where boundaries are to any private property, and if you are entering into somebody's private property, regardless of whether there's a boundary fence, signs, anything like that, you're trespassing. It's a violation of state law. You can be ticketed by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. There is no requirement that you pull signs around your property and tell hunters on your private property, tell hunters to stay out. It's their responsibility to make sure they know where they are hunting.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comments here in the room from anyone? Otherwise, I will open it up to any online folks we might have.
Members of the public, if you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature on your viewing screen. I don't have any hands, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. With that, we're ready to move on. If we are interested in supporting this, it will be a vote, correct? That we would need to uphold the decision of staff. There is in your packet language to that effect. Do we have someone who would like to put a motion forward?
This is Commissioner Braden, and I would put forward a motion to approve the board order as presented in our packet with a request for rec case 114469. As written, with the amendment that we officially refund Mr. Warren's request for review.
We have a motion, Commissioner Braden, a second, Commissioner Heath. We will call a vote. Commissioner Braden.
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez. Aye. Commissioner Heath. Aye. Commissioner Clark.
I'm voting no. Just want to explain for the record that it is somewhat just to reflect that this is very difficult and that we all have the utmost respect for staff and particularly the current circumstances and those that were at the time. And, but I want to also, I want to make it clear that we don't have kind of do-over kind of things that we're doing in the future, hopefully that, that we do make sure that if we're calling something a commitment, that it is formalized and that our letters, books are also formalized. There were certainly problems here and fatal flaws at the front end and at the back end going to
Here, no. The chair will vote yes, but I want to recognize that I appreciate Commissioner Clark's no vote because I think it's important for the public to know we're not happy with this. We don't like being in this position. We have to change the language to reflect the process of the board's final decision because that was lacking in that letter. And that would have been a safeguard against, you're not awarded anything till we vote on it, but that may not always be clear to everyone. So let's do that. I also absolutely agree. Appealing a mistake on our part is different than just appealing a decision. And I think we have to own a mistake. So I support that part of the motion as well. So with that, the motion passes 4-0.
4-1.
4-1. 4-1. Thank you with the maths. And Mr. Boren and Mr. Truby, our apologies for the confusion that was created around this particular issue. It was through no fault of either of yours. We have to move forward from here, and I think this is a fair way to do it. Thank you.
Thanks.
With that, we do have, how do folks feel? Would you like to take a 5-minute break or just keep going? 5 minutes? All right, let's come back in 5. We're adjourned for just a bit. I wasn't noting anything separate.
Mics are open.
Terrific. Thank you all. We're back with the July 14th Colorado State Board of Land Commissioners meeting. We are on to final action items. We do have a solid mineral lease to review, and I'm guessing
Ben Teschner is
Ben's online.
Is joining us remotely.
Wonderful. Okay, Ben,
All
I'm
right,
not-
yeah, let me know when you guys are
Oh,
settled
we-
ready. I can't really tell from.
we can see you and hear you.
Wonderful. All right, for the record, this is Ben Teschner, the Solid Minerals Manager at the State Land Board, and I'm here to bring you a Solid Minerals Lease 114623 with Siete Inc. And online on the Zoom call with us as well, we have Baxter Kirkland, who is representing the applicant. What you can see here is a photo I took a couple weeks ago of the property. And this is standing on, I believe it's County Road 650, just off of the Lasker exit of I-25, looking sort of northwest. And so you can see basically the whole property here in the photo. And the short version is this is a great location for a sand and gravel mine. And it's there's a lot of reasons for that, but perhaps the most obvious is we have indications that there's a sand and gravel resource here, which is obviously always important. But in addition, this property is immediately off of the Lasker exit off of I-25, and you can see I-25 running north-south. This photo is looking almost due north on the right side of this photo, and this provides the trucks and things that are required for mining and selling sand and gravel and moving it around. Really easy access to the southern Colorado market. So, which is really quite strong right now in the Pueblo, Trinidad kind of area, and this sits roughly in between, as we'll see. This property is located in Huerfano County, northern Huerfano County, a few miles, I don't know, 6 or 8 miles south of the Pueblo County border. And if we zoom in kind of in this area, the Pueblo Huerfano County line is shown approximately here. Colorado City is shown in this green circle, and I-25 is this purple line that I've just put in here. The proposed lease area would be this section here, 640 acres. Zoomed in a little further, you can see I-25 really forms the eastern border of this section, and it's County Road 110 on the east side of I-25, and I believe it's County Road 650 on the west side of I-25 at this Lasker exit. When considering this lease, the staff consulted a number of parties, including the grazing lessee, who responded in writing that she was okay with this use, cohabitating with her grazing lease. We consulted with Huerfano County, the planning office, who confirmed that this property was appropriately zoned for this use, and that should we approve this lease, that they will work with the applicant to go through their county permitting processes. We consulted with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who recommended stipulations for burrowing owls and raptors more generally, based on a timing restriction between March 15th and August 31 for initial disturbance. And what this means is if the applicant intends to have their initial disturbances within these timeframes, they have to go get a qualified biologist to come out and do a study and confirm that that raptor nests and burrowing owls are not within the this within the disturbance area or appropriate buffer zones for those. There was also an aquatic species concern. So there's a ephemeral stream that runs through this property called Tom Branch. And so Parks and Wildlife requested specifically that we, if the applicant intends to disturb within 500 feet of that drainage, that we sort of circle back with them. And so that will require specific approval from staff and consultation with Parks and Wildlife, should the applicant find that that's necessary. The financials on this lease would be $5 an acre in rent, which results in $3,200 a year. A royalty of 63 cents a ton, and an advanced minimum royalty of $10,000. And so just for a little review, what an advanced minimum royalty is a royalty paid annually and held as a credit against future production. So what this does is ensures that the land board receives income on the property in royalty, even if the applicant is not mining very much or is unable to mine at all. It incentivizes the applicant to produce from the lease as quickly as possible. And in cases where there may be commingled properties, this is not one of them, but in cases where there may be state land, commingled in a mining operation with private land or other lands, it encourages the applicant to develop the state lands first. This results in a minimum revenue annually of $13,200 per year. And staff believe there's an upside here of $50,000 to $100,000 a year should this move through the permitting process and find the resource here that we believe exists, or we're certainly hoping exists. So therefore, staff is recommending that the board approve Solid Minerals Lease 114623 with Siete Inc. And for your convenience, here is the board order. Happy to take any questions, as I know Mr. Kirkland is also happy to take questions as well.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions from commissioners? Don't see any. I think you had us at, this is a great site.
Because it's near a resource.
Exactly. Any public comment? I don't see any in the room. And Nick, if we have any online.
Public commenters, use the raise hand. Commissioner, I don't have any hands raised.
All right, with that, we do have a board order to that reflects what would be needed in a motion, if someone would like to make a motion.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Heath, I move approval of Solid Minerals Lease 114623 in Griffin County for the board order.
Have a motion, Commissioner
Could you
Heath?
just pause real quick? The draft board order looks like it has a typo of June on the board order that
Oh,
I
it
just
does.
noticed as it's or
Should be July.
pointed out, and it should be July. So just to be clear on the record, we'll update that for the signature.
Thank you. Apologies for that.
All right, we have a motion, Commissioner Heath, second, Commissioner Chavez. Let's have a vote. Commissioner Braden, Commissioner Chavez, Commissioner Heath, Commissioner Clark, and the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, commissioners.
Your enthusiasm for this being an excellent spot.
Hey, this is my jam.
But adjacent to immediately for transportation that doesn't fall by somebody's home is always.
It's always a plus, indeed. Okay, Nick is with us on to our next item. We have a couple of small changes to the director performance policy. So I'll turn it to Nick.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, this is Assistant Director Nick Massey, here to present review to the Director Performance Review Policy. on behalf of Andy Bissett, our Transactions and Records Services Manager. This is an excellent opportunity to simply approve a policy that's important to us. I'm joking, obviously mimicking Ben's language. I don't have a presentation, but ultimately in your packet, you see, I just want to make some minor changes to the policy. It's helpful to us to do that even when the changes are minor, simply for us to keep it in view, keep it on our calendar, keep the dates moving, and just make sure that it's tight. So I welcome any questions that you might have about what's presented there, but also anticipate or look forward to a motion to that change.
Any questions from commissioners?
I would ask Bill whether we're doing this fair to the position.
I believe it is, yeah. I think we've got a fine policy here that works for this board and for the state process as well.
All right, any comments? Public comment on this particular agenda item? Either there's none in the room that I see. I'm doubtful there's any online. All right, with that, we do have a board order that could be reflected in the motion if someone would like to do so.
I move to approve the proposed revisions to the charter performance review policy 200-001 as presented in the board order.
We have a motion, Commissioner Clark. Is there a second? Commissioner Braden. We will have a vote. Commissioner Braden. Commissioner Chavez. Commissioner Heath. Commissioner Clark. And the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. All right, we are moving right along. Abe Medina, who is here live and in person with us with an IND fund request. All right, cool. Welcome, Abe.
Good morning, Commissioners. Abe Medina, Recreation Program Manager, with the State Land Board. I'm here to for an IND fund request on our Canyon parcel in Saguache County. The purpose of this particular IND fund request is to improve access onto the school trust property and help facilitate better management of recreational use on the parcel. The property that I'm talking referencing is Penitente Canyon. It's located in southern Saguache County. It's a 520-acre parcel. I do want to mention that, well, before I jump into that, this parcel has seen increased recreational use in the area. Primarily, it is an area adjacent to BLM property that has a significant amount of mountain biking, climbing, and just general recreation use by the public happening on it. Those impacts have been over the years spilling over onto the state trust land parcel, and we're starting to see increased impacts from that public recreational use. About 6 months ago, San Luis Valley Great Outdoors, a community group community nonprofit that functions in the San Luis Valley, and does recreation management, trail improvements, and works with lots of the counties in the San Luis Valley on grant funding for recreation type improvements. They approached the state land board and, with a novel concept of they would like to. They asked about putting 5 short-term rental cabins on the Penitente Canyon parcel that they would rent out, manage over the year, over the term of their lease, I'm sorry. And they would use the proceeds or the gross proceeds from those, the net proceeds from those rentals to help support their, I think they call them the goats. It's a crew that they have that does trail management up and down the valley. It supports a lot of the community, a lot of the counties and cities in the valley. So they, I will mention that this lease for the cabins is on your agenda, on your board leasing agenda. This is only the request for today. This is only for the IP request. So just to clarify a little bit about this. So this right here in blue is the Penitente Canyon State Trust Land. There are a couple of improved roads that do go past the property. And this road right here, which shown as a dotted line, crosses the state trust land and enters into the BLM Penitente Canyon Recreation Area. The BLM does have about a 15 site campsite on their property. It receives a fair amount of visitation. This is I think as mentioned in the board, is an area that has, in addition to the recreation use, the climbing, the mountain biking that happens here, it also is an area that has a high concentration of rock art or
Petroglyphs.
petroglyphs, yes, in there, and they're protected and they're interpreted by the BLM on the property. The trust land or the project that the BLM is proposing is on this northern end, and it is fairly close to the network of trail systems that occur on the BLM portion. Right now where I have this marker with the cabin on it, that is where San Luis Valley Go would like to place the 5 cabins. It's in an area that's kind of tucked right up against, pretty close to the BLM, and could provide a good, for folks staying at the cabins, could provide a good access point into the property. One of the benefits for us, if this is a use that is approved, is it would, with having the San Luis Valley Go in this area, having the presence and having these cabins here, they would also, as part of that role task, help us control some of the unauthorized and dispersed camping that is starting to happen along this 2-track road that cuts through the property. One of the big events that they have out on that the BLM does have on the Penitente Canyon is the 24 hours of, or the 12 hours of Penitente bicycle race. And as that has grown in popularity.
Is it on Mother's Day? That was the one yesterday, yeah.
That has increased in popularity because they have limited sites for folks to stay on the BLM portion of the area. Some of that overnight camping has started to spill over into the trust land, and of course those impacts are associated with it. So staff believes that this potential use is a good partnership between the organizations. So as mentioned, or the request for IND funds is $35,000, and from that it would go to help fund road improvements, sustainable access onto the property, parking, and the gravel paths for these cabins. They're intended to be temporary kits built offsite, brought onto the property and sitting on a compacted gravel foundation. They would not be poured concrete step walls. So something that they could, San Luis Valley Go, if this was not successful, or at the end of the term of their lease was not, they didn't want to continue it, they could move it to another location. So as mentioned, the request is for $35,000 from the Investment Development Fund for the materials used here. San Luis Valley and their crews, since they have that GOAT crew, they will be helping with putting that gravel down, putting and grading it out. As part of our agreement, and with the lease that's been proposed with San Luis Valley Go, they have committed to pay back through rental fees that they collect on the cabins, this $35,000 over the 5 years of their 10-year lease. So they intend to, they hope to generate enough revenue from these rentals that they'll be able to pay this back their lease. With that, just a couple of things. I already mentioned them. Their trail crew will be building them. They're going to help us with vigilance of the property. And the lease itself, the way that we structured it, it's a 10-year lease, and they'll pay the greater of $2,500 or 10% gross revenue over the term. They're fairly confident they'll be able to pay it back, as mentioned, it's $35,000 over those first 5 years. This is just a view of the property, and just for my sake, I put this together, just kind of showing where these lines art show approximately where these cabins will be placed. They're intended to be tucked in here against the hills. Not entirely, or somewhat camouflaged with some of these trees in the raw background area. So I think they'll blend well with the landscape. So with that, staff recommends the board approve investment development fund request for up to $35,000.
Let the record reflect, this is not our idea of affordable housing.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Exactly.
So I do have a board order of
Commissioner Brady?
Thank you. Just to clarify, this is just, we've got $35,000 with the cabins.
Yeah, so part of the discussions with San Luis Valley Go is, since these are improvements that would remain on the land, should there at least be there, they would provide the cabins, place them, since those can be moved off later, but the improvements, that's why they requested for assistance, was because they're going to stay there.
And they're going to reimburse us.
Yes, and they will.
Any other questions or comments related to this item? Any public comment related to this IND request? I don't see any in the room. Nick, if you want to check online. Well, that answers that question. Bored everyone out of the internet. All right, with that, we would need a motion.
Commissioner Thomas, I move we approve the IND fund request for recreation 114641 as described in the.
Thank you, Commissioner Chavez. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Heath. With that, we'll call a vote. Commissioner Brayton.
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
Commissioner Heath.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. Thanks, thanks, Dave. We are moving right along. Nick, are you playing the role of Andy Bissett?
I am.
We are on to the board leasing agenda for July 2022.
Commissioners, thank you. For the record, Nick Massey, Assistant Director, here to present this month's board leasing agenda for your review and approval on behalf of Andy Bissett, Transactions and Record Services Manager. In your packet, you've been presented a leasing agenda with 4 competitive bids and 2 new leases. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those. I need to point out that item number 1 in the list, Ag Lease 114656, has been requested for review. So your motion on this would be items 2 through 6.
So that's pulled from this
agenda
list. Okay.
Happy to try to answer any questions if I can.
Any questions from commissioners? I think we do, right? We'll have to reflect that the amended board leasing agenda does not include item 1.
And we'll update the materials.
Record, okay, sounds great. Any public comment? None in the room. I'm assuming we still don't have public online. We can check that.
Not seeing any hands, Commissioner.
All right, with that, we're ready for a motion if someone would like to put one forward.
So I move the ordinance agenda for July. Five items 2 through 6.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. We do have a motion reflecting the amended board leasing agenda. Do we have a second? Commissioner Braden, let's call a vote. Commissioner Braden. Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
Commissioner Heath. Commissioner Clark? And the board, the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, we are on to minutes. Does anyone have any changes they'd like reflected in the minutes?
I didn't know my anecdotally know that.
We were sad as well. Oh, we should amend that to say the entire commission was sad. Mr. Braden was not there. Yes. All right, the minutes are approved by acclamation, and I believe that's it for this meeting.
So I wanted
Yes.
I wanted to respond to the issue that was raised in the early conversation with county commissioners about how we as the landlord respond to this request for land for the house. Because we hear this, not just here, but all over the state. And I think it's something that might be worth us really talking about on a broader policy, because what might work in one area on land board might not be appropriate on land that we own in other places. And it feels like that's a conversation that maybe we need to think about as we move forward. And I guess I'm just asking for some maybe conversation between the commission and staff about how we might approach not only their request specifically, but how we think about this more broadly. You know, because there's one part of me that says there will always be a request for no question. On the other hand, it does seem to be a really expressed need, and in some cases, we have parcels that might be appropriate, and so we need to think about how to consider this.
Okay. Happy to do some work on that. But by way of background, about 2 years ago, it was probably close to 3, right after Governor Polis took office, he created a group to look at this. And as part of that, we were asked to map all of our lands. And it turned out that we only had 12 parcels. I'm going to get the number a little bit off, but despite the magnitude of our holdings, very little of it is within 3 miles of the municipal boundary. And so the discussion that we've been having with the county commissioners is, hey, we do have land in your county. You've got to do some massive utility runs to make our land workable for your purposes. We did identify 12 sites also that the governor's office has. A couple of them we dealt with, 13th and Sherman, for example, and the Arista parcel in Broomfield. But I think there's a misconception out there that because we have so much land, we can solve the problem. And the reality is our land just doesn't, most of it does not work well for this. Where it does, we're trying to engage in those sorts of discussions. It's also, the counties also need to be reminded that when we go to sell land, we're required to sell it at market value. We can't sell it at a discount. And while they could step up and ask for us to sell it in an 1165 transaction, that is direct to a government transaction, so that there wouldn't be competing bids, that still does need to occur at a market value. Those two factors make it a little bit trickier. The other piece that I've just tried to do on a personal level, because it's an issue I care a lot about, and I serve on a board that does this, is connect them to resources, whether it's creating their own land trust. I give out Grounded Solution, Tony Pickett's name, a lot, and try to aim them at resources that will help them help themselves more than we're able to do. But I'm happy to put together some sort of a workshop or a discussion, or perhaps it's have somebody from the governor's office come in and talk about what they're trying to do, just so we understand the issue more broadly at the state level. There's a lot of funding going toward this now. There was $400 million in ARPA funds that are designated to go to affordable housing in various ways. Happy to have that kind of a discussion for you as well. I don't want you to think we're ignoring the issue. We're getting all those phone calls and we're responding the best way we can. There's a lot less overlap in those two circles than one might think.
Just. Oh, sorry. No, I thought that was the next response. I do think there's a lot of misunderstanding because people are going to go, you've got millions of acres.
Yeah.
Just maybe clarify.
Yeah.
Clearly doing.
In that, and I'll be brief, I just wanted to, thank you for bringing that up, because I was considering something similar in terms of if it's a workshop for us, I think I would really appreciate, that work that was done before, that mapping kind of being presented to us, and we can look through that, because I think it's also important to, it's one thing to say this is far from where the infrastructure is now, but important to show that, and so that people who are in these counties can understand, like, this is the disconnect. So do the same in transit planning, right? We talk about first and last mile. You create transit corridors, you can create light rail line, but then it's, okay, yes, this got you from station to station. How do you get from station to home and from station to work? This is similar in that it's that missing piece that is why some of this development isn't happening now. So, and it's a lot about that future planning and laying the groundwork now, so that there can be more opportunities. And as we see areas grow, they will get closer together. So I think that we can play potentially an important role in explaining that, but then also in bringing together those resources. I did the same thing with the folks today. Do you know this person who's doing this work in your community now? The fact that elevation is being there. So I would love to have, we are a form of a mantra, and then maybe have elevation kind of, then I think it'd be helpful because we are getting the questions, for us to each individually be prepared as well to answer that, but also to be able to share kind of, here's what affordable housing looks like today, and here's how some of that ground is, some of that layered financing look like. I have one question for you, which is that, we have an obligation to sell at market rate, or at market values. Do we still have essentially a tax exemption that can go through, that flows through, that's sold to as well? I mean,
I think you're asking a legal question, but I'm going to venture that the answer is no, we can't sort of extend that to the buyer.
Not if we sell
But
it in fee, but like if we had, so when you do a ground lease, that's on.
13th and Sherman, so there's a housing authority that's a 0.001.
So it's the same
Right,
anywhere.
it's same. Yeah, again, that was sort of a CHFA tax credit deal, and
That's what I thought.
you
I
know
just
how
wanted
those
to-
get structured. But yeah, that's how those projects sort of reduce the property taxes.
Yeah, I just didn't know that was that traditional or if there was some other value that we were providing.
I think what was interesting from the county commissioners today is they do think there's a potential for infrastructure. What I think people might be interested in is if they're going to get funding for infrastructure and put in that as a rationale for getting that funding, the affordable housing will be included in the mix. There might be a way for us to partner differently going forward, because I agree it's 12 now, but it could change later. And as communities grow, that certainly could be a factor as well.
And I think they've got to work those policies into their land use policies. So, when they get out to wherever our parcel is, they need to zone that in such a way that there is a piece of it that's required for affordable housing. And then, depending on what they want that housing to look like, if they want it to be for sale and they want it to be permanently affordable, then they can use 3 or 4 tools. We're not one of the tools, but they make sure that it gets bought by a land trust or by themselves and they deed restrict it somehow, or they can't let it go to market and just let a a for-profit developer own it. So when I said I was trying to introduce them to some of these other tools like Land Trust, when the development does get ripe, they need to know who they're going to call to make sure they can achieve the goals they have as a community for the parcel. We can't do that for them. And so trying to take those steps as well.
I think,
Call it those 2 parcels that they were speaking about were part of the 12.
No, they're not.
yeah. So I think the point being, if we can be responsive,
Yeah.
which we are, but maybe even sharing, it might be worth us producing some materials to actually send out so that they actually have resources from us. You know, it shows a willingness for us to help and to be collaborative. Right. Then we are happy to always talk about that.
I just want to say that despite the fact that land might be out of ways and eventually people build there, you can't just build in isolation. People need services.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot to the equation, but I think some of what between yourself and Aaron in particular, the resources, to help guide these folks around their opportunities is huge.
You know a lot about this. I feel like it was helpful for me to just hear it, and maybe we could get it in writing so the rest of us are at least familiar.
Well, it gives you something to respond with too.
And you can always respond by aiming them at me when you get questions, because Mike acknowledged, we've met with him a couple of times over the years. We're trying to get him connected to an Elevation or a Grounded Solutions or a somebody like that, so they can help themselves and remind them that they have the ultimate control through the land use planning process. So they can get the outcomes they want through a planning process.
I would love to work more directly with the real estate staff and others.
I will call.
Yeah, thanks, Josie, for bringing that up, because it is now, we hear it frequently. We are hearing it more and more often.
2 or 3 other housekeeping items while the mics are still on. First, the Permanent Fund Investment Board has a representative from the land board by statute. One of the 5 members is one of the 5 of you. Commissioner Scanlon has been serving in that role. That 2-year period is coming up this fall. The treasurer's office asked if she would continue serving or whether another one of you wanted to play in that, serve on that board. So that's a decision the 5 of you need to make. Similarly, this is about the time of year when we elect a new board president or vote to keep the same board president. And so again, that's a decision for the 5 of you. We can do it next month if you want time to think about it. There's no magic to today's meeting, but I want to get it on your radar. And then the last one is just talk to you about the 2 upcoming meetings and tell you what we know from a planning perspective so far. Do you want to tackle the first one first? Do you all want to have some time to think about that and we can just make that an agenda item at the August meeting? Great.
First obvious question is, Christine,
Well, it's fine. I talked to Bill about the investment board in particular. It is a little bit of time, but I really would like to see through, since we have the bill passed, now there's a committee that's going to be formed to advise the treasurer, and I would like to see that through. And then I happily would let someone else do this, but I think honestly, we've spent so much time on this with the treasurer's office and with that board that it probably makes sense for me to continue in that role. And there's wild cards around the upcoming election and that we'll have to also navigate. So I think that one makes sense. And with regard to the land board, I'm happy to stay in this role. I'm also happy if someone else wants to take on the role. I think that succinctly summarizes my feelings.
for one, love to have continue both roles. recognizing that it does take extra time. Appreciate it.
I would like to say yes, continue with the permanent fund and then, but I would like to wait till August.
Okay. Great. Review. So permanent fund will do,
Okay,
board officers will take care of in August. Okay, good segue to August. August will be in Walden. The Wednesday workshop will be a tour of the State Forest State Park and North Sand Dunes, Sand Hills. So we've got sort of a robust Wednesday tour like we did down here yesterday, and then a board meeting on Thursday morning. That probably means we need to get up there Tuesday night again. We've booked hotels. I'm looking at Rachel for the Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And I think from a timing perspective, that meeting will look and feel sort of like this one, just up north. For September, we had originally talked about going down to San Miguel County and looking at the Wilson Mesa parcel, if that had made progress and was getting any closer to legal resolution and the possibility of the sale. That hasn't transpired. The legal matters are just taking a while. We're in discovery right now. That's going to be months and months more. But we do have a more timely large asset discussion that we need to have around the Bohart Ranch and a couple of our properties that are adjacent to military bases. You may recall about a year ago, we talked about the REPI program. That's an effort by the military to do some preservation buffers around their bases. That has made progress. There's now some funding available for it. The Nature Conservancy and Trust for Public Land have been pushing that in DC. And we're now at a point where we need to start to make some hard decisions because the funding is becoming available. So what we're proposing to do in September instead is be down in El Paso County. We'll see the Bohart Ranch. We will see a couple of the other properties that could be affected by that funding. We'll have presentations with the Nature Conservancy and TPL and members of the military around the first priority properties. And we'll, I think, need to stay in El Paso County where there is a possibility that we'll be able to do the tour by helicopter. But we're trying to work with Fort Carson to make that happen. And there's lots of variables when you're dealing with the military. But that would be our first priority. But if not, we'll be in cars to tour some of those in El Paso County in September. So plan to be on the road down there. Rachel, again, make reservations for us all.
Mention a date sheet.
Thank you. I had emailed you about this. Will you give me the?
I slid it back a day and a week, so it's a Thursday.
So
Friday.
the military folks and the Nature Conservancy folks were only available for the tour on the Thursday. That is, can somebody tell me the date? Thursday, September 14th? 15th. So that will be the workshop day because that's the only day the presenters were available. Because they're going to want some votes based on what you're seeing and thinking, we're going to do the board meeting on Friday morning. And so just if you'll shift that back in your calendars.
1560 is that.
Yes, please.
So in regard to Walden, so we just meet in Denver and then drive up to town.
Yes, Commissioner Braden, it may be faster for you to drive there straight. Boulder commissioners, maybe we can figure out a way to pick you up along the way. We're going that way. So exactly, that's a good plan. I have missed the Walden exit in the past.
Are you coming through Summit County, I-70?
I don't know the answer to that yet, but there's
Let me know.
possible we can send vehicles two different
Let me know.
directions. So we'll look at the logistics in a little bit more detail here this week.
and so Rachel, do you mind moving the calendar invite dates in September for us? That'd be great. Thanks.
So that was it for my housekeeping. Any other questions or?
We're good.
Okay,
But I assume you'll be sending us updated.
we will do that. Yep, Rachel just got that. She will update the September stuff. All right.
What's the plan for those of us, like, we have lunch, are we taking that with us, are we
Wow.
in here?
Well, the car that's taking us to the plane needs to clean up all this also.
What we have?
Yeah, it's three. We just want to
Okay.
clean, but not like spit. Yeah.
I think that ended our meeting. Sorry.
Yes.
For,
Yes.
for our record, there's a microphone
Meeting
still
is
running.
adjourned.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, the housekeeping doesn't matter, but
I know, it's really.
I like it. I'm gonna start.
That's why
I feel I should start. Yeah, hey, it's been a failing of mine.
So if you can assure us by then. I think the pilot should know that.
Yes. I promise I will not leave.
12:30. 12:30. I'm gonna give him 12:30 half hour.
recording shut down.
I'm gonna try.